The sun sat high above the endless desert, shining with a heat so strong that even the rocks seemed tired. Elias Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his horse slowly across the sandy ground. He had been on the trail for days, moving a small group of cattle toward a trading post many miles ahead. The desert was familiar to him. Yet every time he crossed it, he felt the same mixture of fear and respect. It was a place where a person had to be careful, alert, and patient. One mistake in this land could turn a simple journey into a dangerous one. Elias was young, but he carried himself with the calmness of someone who had seen more than his age suggested. Life as a cowboy had taught him how to handle long nights, rough weather, and loneliness. Still, there was something peaceful about riding alone with only the sound of hooves and the soft rhythm of the wind. It gave him time to think mostly about his family back home, and the choices that had led him to this life of long trails and distant horizons. As he rode along a narrow path between two stretches of dry bushes, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just the wind shifting the sand, but the movement felt too deliberate. Elias slowed his horse and leaned forward, studying the ground. The sand here was disturbed, marked by uneven footprints that seemed to wander without direction. This was unusual. Travelers rarely passed through this part of the desert, and those who did usually left clearer trails. He climbed down from his horse and crouched beside the prints. Some were deep, suggesting the person had stumbled. Others were faint, showing tired, dragging steps. Elias felt a small wave of concern rise inside him. Someone had been here, and it looked like they were in trouble. He stood up and scanned the horizon. The desert stretched out endlessly in all directions, silent and empty. No one else seemed to be around. Normally, he would have continued on his way. Getting involved with strangers in the desert could lead to unexpected problems. But something about the tracks bothered him. They felt urgent, as if every step carried fear or exhaustion. He sighed softly, knowing he couldn't ignore them. He grabbed the reins of his horse and followed the trail. The tracks led away from the main path, weaving between scattered rocks and low desert plants. Elias moved carefully, one step at a time, aware that the heat was growing stronger. The air felt thick, and each breath tasted dry. After several minutes of walking, he noticed something ahead, a shape lying near a dried-up creek bed. He stopped immediately. The shape was still. For a brief moment, he wondered if it was just a pile of clothes left behind by a traveler. But as he approached, he saw the truth. A woman lay on the ground, her skin dusty and her clothes torn by the harsh desert wind. Her hair, long and dark, spread across the sand like a shadow. She was breathing, but only barely. Elias felt his heart jump. He had seen travelers in trouble before, but never someone this weak. He quickly knelt beside her, unsure if she would wake. After a moment, the woman's eyes opened slowly. They were tired, yet full of determination, like someone fighting to stay awake despite overwhelming exhaustion. She looked at Elias, then at the horizon behind him, and whispered something so softly he almost missed it. "Don't stop. Keep going." Elias froze. He wasn't sure what she meant. Her voice carried urgency, but not fear. It sounded like she wasn't talking about herself, but about something else, something he couldn't see yet. He gently asked if she could speak more, but her words came slowly, as if every sentence required effort. She didn't say she was hurt, nor did she ask for water, though she clearly needed it. Instead, she repeated her plea, a little stronger this time. "Don't stop, keep going." This confused him deeply. He had expected her to ask for help, not to push him forward. He wondered if she was afraid of something behind them. He turned to look, but the desert was calm, just sand, rocks, and the shimmering waves of heat rising from the ground. He looked back at her, noticing for the first time the patterns on her clothing and the small beaded bracelet on her wrist. She was Apache. Elias had never spoken closely with anyone from her community before. He respected them, but he also knew misunderstandings were common between people who lived so differently. He didn't want to offend her or make a wrong move. The woman lifted her hand slightly, pointing toward a stretch of land that sloped upward into an open plain. She whispered again, this time with a hint of warning hidden behind her tired voice. Up, up there. Don't stop. Elias felt torn. The cowboy in him wanted to help her sit up, give her water, and find shade. But the uncertain part of him hesitated. What if she knew something he didn't? What if danger was near and she understood the area better than he ever could? He tried speaking gently. I want to help you. Tell me what you need. But the reply he received was not what he expected. She stared at him with eyes that held both strength and exhaustion, and she said, help by moving. Not here. Not now. The desert wind brushed past them, carrying with it the faint scent of dry earth. Elias listened closely. Still nothing. No sounds of other people. No signs of animals. No danger he could identify. But her insistence made him uneasy. He trusted his instincts, yet he understood something important. People who lived their entire lives in this land knew things that others didn't. If she believed staying still was unsafe, he could not take that lightly. He offered her his hand, and this time she accepted it weakly. As he helped her sit up, she winced. Though she tried hard to hide her pain, Elias admired her strength. Even in her weakened state, she carried herself with dignity, as if she refused to be seen as helpless. He checked her injuries carefully, making sure to be respectful and gentle. She was dehydrated and exhausted, but not severely wounded. With proper care, she could recover. The real danger, Elias realized, was the desert itself, and whatever unseen reason she had for telling him to keep moving. He brought his horse closer, preparing to lift her onto the saddle. As he did, she whispered something new, something that made him pay even more attention. Someone else, behind me. Those words explained everything. She wasn't alone. Someone else, someone she cared about, might still be out there, lost or injured. Her urgency was not for herself but for whoever remained behind. Understanding this changed everything for Elias. This wasn't a simple rescue. It might require more strength, more patience, and more courage than he had expected when he began his journey that morning. Still, he felt a quiet determination rise inside him. He couldn't leave her. He couldn't ignore the possibility of another life waiting for help somewhere in the desert. He gently helped her onto the horse, making sure she was balanced. She leaned slightly toward him, still weak but alert. She looked at him with a mixture of trust and hope. And Elias felt a responsibility settle on his shoulders, not heavy, but real. The desert stretched before them, wide and bright, ready to test them both. Elias took a slow breath, tightened his grip on the reins, and prepared to move forward. He didn't know where this path would lead, or what challenges waited ahead, but he knew one thing with certainty: he would not stop. Not now. Not with someone depending on him. Elias walked beside his horse, guiding it slowly across the warm sand. Naline sat carefully in the saddle, her back straight despite her weakness. Her eyes remained half open, scanning the desert as if she still expected something to appear behind them. Elias kept glancing back too, even though he saw nothing but the quiet landscape stretching far into the distance. For a while, they moved without speaking. The wind was soft, and the sky carried a pale shade of blue that made everything feel calm. Though Elias sensed an invisible tension hanging around them. He didn't know much about what had happened to her, and he didn't want to push her to talk before she was ready. But the question echoed in his mind again and again: who else was out there? Finally, Naline broke the silence. Her voice was steadier than before, though it carried a tired softness. She said, "Water. May I have a little?" Elias nodded right away. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small canteen. He held it up so she could drink carefully without spilling. She took slow, measured sips, showing she was used to saving every drop when needed. When she finished, Elias put the canteen away and continued walking. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "I walked a long time," she said, staring ahead. "I thought I would stop, But I kept going. Her words sounded simple, but Elias knew there was much more behind them. He waited patiently, allowing her to speak at her own pace. She continued, "I was with my people. We were crossing the lower path near the river. Then the sky changed. The clouds moved fast. Heavy rain came suddenly." Elias nodded. Flash floods were common in the desert, especially during certain seasons. A dry creek could turn dangerous without warning. He listened closely as she went on. "The water came quickly," she said. "It covered the ground, and the path disappeared. We tried to move to higher land, but the current was strong. Some of us reached a rock wall. Others—" She paused, catching her breath. "Others were swept away." Elias felt a quiet sadness settle over him. He knew the desert held many difficult moments, and sometimes people had to rely only on their instincts to survive. He didn't interrupt her. He simply kept walking, letting her share what she could. Nalin looked down at her hands, as if remembering every moment clearly. "I held onto a fallen branch. I climbed up. But I could not see everyone. I searched after the rain stopped. I looked for anyone who might still be alive." Her voice softened even further. "I found no one." Elias understood now why she had been wandering alone. She had not been lost. She had been searching. Searching with hope, even when hope was thin. He admired that, even though he knew how painful it must have been. She took a slow breath and said, "Then I saw tracks. Only one set. They were weak, like someone walking with little strength. I followed them. The sun was strong. My feet were tired, but I did not stop, because maybe someone needed me." Elias looked at her with respect. "You were trying to find them," he said. She nodded gently. "Yes. Someone from my group. A younger woman. She might have gone another way during the flood. I thought if I followed the tracks, I could bring her back." Elias asked quietly, "Did you find her?" Nalin shook her head. "No, the tracks led far. Then the wind erased some of them. I tried to keep walking, but I was too tired. That is when I fell. And then—" She looked at him with a faint, grateful smile. "Then you came." Elias smiled back, though only slightly. "I'm glad I did," he said. He meant it. Finding her had changed his entire day. But he didn't regret stopping to help. They continued moving, heading toward the small ridge Nalin had pointed to earlier. The desert began to shift in color from bright golden sand to stretches of reddish earth and scattered stones. Elias recognized this area. It led toward cooler ground where the wind was stronger, and shade could sometimes be found under tall rocks. As they climbed higher, Nalin's strength improved little by little. She held onto the saddle more firmly and took deeper breaths. Elias could tell she had a strong spirit. People who gave up easily never lasted long in the desert. After some time, she spoke again. "When I told you not to stop, I was afraid you would stay near that place." She looked over her shoulder at the area they had left behind. "The sun there is too strong. The ground has no shade. If you help someone who is weak, you must keep moving. If you stop, the heat wins." Elias nodded. He understood. "You were trying to protect us both," he said. "Yes," she replied simply. "You did not know me, but you listened. That saved me." Elias felt a small warmth in his chest. He wasn't a hero, nor did he think of himself as someone who saved lives. But he believed in doing the right thing when he could. Hearing her say that meant more than he expected. As they continued walking, small details in the land started to change. The ground lifted into soft hills. Sparse trees appeared short, twisted, but offering thin lines of shade. The wind became cooler. Elias knew they were entering a safer part of the desert, though they were still far from any settlement or camp. Nalin studied the land with experienced eyes. "This place is better," she said. "The wind here tells stories. It carries sound from far away. If someone is near, we will know." Elias wasn't sure he could hear what she meant, but he trusted her instincts. She had lived in this land much longer than he ever had. After another hour of slow travel, Nayland asked him to stop for a moment. He helped her climb down from the horse and let her sit on a flat rock. He offered water again, which she took gratefully. This time she drank a little more. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, feeling the breeze against her face. Then she said, "I want to tell you something important." Generally, Elias knelt beside her. She opened her eyes and spoke with steady seriousness. "There may be someone still out there. Maybe the young woman. Maybe someone else." When the flood came, people spread in different directions. Not everyone follows the same path. Some might still be walking, hoping to find help. Elias listened closely, sensing she was preparing him for something difficult. "I want to search again," she said softly, "when I am strong enough. But I cannot do it alone now. My strength is not ready. I must rest. And I do not want you to feel trapped because of me." Elias shook his head gently. "You're not trapping me. We will figure this out together." Her expression softened with relief. She looked at him gratefully before continuing. "You have a kind heart, Elias Carter. Not many people stop for strangers in the desert. Many walk past without looking." Elias looked away modestly. "Maybe. But I couldn't have left you there." She smiled slightly. "I know." They rested for a while, letting the wind cool their faces. After some time, Elias helped her climb back onto the horse. They began moving again, heading toward a narrow trail between two rocky slopes. The shade grew stronger as the rocks rose higher around them. As they entered the narrow passage, Nayland looked toward the sky and said quietly, "The desert does not show mercy, but it gives signs. We must watch and listen." Elias appreciated her wisdom. Even in weakness, she spoke with a calm understanding that made the desert feel less threatening. They followed the trail deeper into the rocks. The air cooled, and the sound of wind echoed softly between the walls. Elias felt hope growing inside him. This place felt safer. It felt like a place where they could rest, gather strength, and maybe prepare to search for others. Nayland held onto the saddle, her eyes steady. "Thank you for helping me," she said sincerely. "We will keep going, and maybe we will find someone who still waits." Elias nodded, feeling a quiet determination rise within him again. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing clearly. He would not let fear or doubt stop him now. He would keep going just as she had asked from the very beginning. Elias walked with a steady pace, letting the horse move slowly so Nayland could rest without being shaken too much. The narrow trail between the rocky walls gave them shade, and the cooler air felt like a gift after the long hours under the sun. Every step forward felt easier now. Though the journey was still far from over, Elias could hear his own quiet footsteps on the stone, mixed with the soft echo of the horse's hooves. It was the kind of silence that felt peaceful but alert at the same time. Nayland sat upright on the saddle, her hands resting gently on the front strap. Her breathing was calmer now, and the color was slowly returning to her face. Though she was still weak, Elias could sense her strength returning bit by bit. She kept her eyes on the rocky path ahead, as if every detail mattered. After some time, she finally spoke. Her voice sounded much stronger than before. "This place. I know it," she said softly. "My people sometimes travel through here when the weather is too harsh on the open sand." Elias looked around thoughtfully. "Seems like a safe path," he replied. "It is safe, but only if you keep moving," she said. "At night, cold winds pass here. During storms, the rocks protect you. But if you stay too long, it becomes dangerous, because wild animals search for shade too." Elias nodded. "Then we'll move as long as we can." They continued walking until the path widened enough for them to walk side by side. The tall rock walls opened into a spacious clearing covered with flat stones and a few scattered desert plants. Elias stopped for a moment to let the horse drink from a small puddle formed from the recent flood. Nayland watched quietly, studying the land with her experienced eyes. Elias sat down on a nearby stone and took a deep breath. The long walk had tired him too, though he tried not to show it. After a quiet moment, he asked gently, "Do you think the person you were searching for might have come this way?" Nalan looked out across the clearing, her eyes thoughtful. Maybe. After the flood, many paths become unclear. Some people walk toward water. Others walk toward higher ground. She was strong. Very strong. I believe she kept moving. If she reached this place, she would leave signs. Elias didn't know what signs she meant, but he trusted her. She bent down beside a patch of disturbed soil and studied it carefully. For a few seconds, she said nothing, simply running her fingers over the ground. Then she stood slowly and said, "These are footprints. Old ones. But they are here." Elias walked closer. To him, the ground looked ordinary, just sand and some scattered stones. But Nalan pointed to a faint mark, like the imprint of a heel. "This was made before the wind came through," she explained. "The pattern shows someone walking with careful steps. Not running. Not falling." "That could be her," Elias said. "It could be," Nalan agreed, "but we must follow it slowly. The tracks are weak now." Elias helped Nalan back onto the saddle. He could see that even though she had rested, she needed more time to regain full strength. Still, her determination seemed to give her an invisible boost, keeping her focused. They followed the faint tracks up a gentle slope. The path curved around large rocks and opened into another stretch of desert. The sun was rising higher again, painting the land with shades of gold and orange. Elias lifted his hand above his eyes to shield them from the glare. They moved forward carefully. Nalan scanned the ground continuously, guiding Elias whenever she saw something worth following. "There," she said at one point. "A broken twig. Someone passed through." Elias smiled in admiration. "Your eyes catch everything." Nalan returned a small smile. "When you grow up in the desert, you learn to notice what others do not. Every mark is a story. Every step tells something." Elias found her words comforting. Even though the land seemed empty to him, she saw clues everywhere. After a long stretch of walking, they reached a spot where the ground dipped slightly, forming a natural basin. At the center stood a large boulder, half in shade. Elias noticed something on the boulder before Nalan even pointed it out, a piece of fabric stuck to a rough edge. He walked up to it and gently lifted it. The fabric was thin, light brown, and torn at one side. It looked like it had been pulled from someone's clothing. When Nalan saw it, her eyes filled with both hope and worry. "This belongs to her," she said softly. "I remember the cloth." She wore it around her shoulders. Elias held the fabric carefully. "Then she was definitely here." Nalan nodded. "Yes. But now we must understand why she left it behind. Was she hurt, or did it get caught when she passed too close?" Elias examined the boulder. "It might have snagged while she walked by," he said. "I don't see any signs of struggle." "That is good," Nalan said with relief. "It means she was still strong enough to move." They continued searching around the basin. Everywhere they looked, Nalan found small, almost invisible details. A slightly bent plant stem, a smoothed patch of dirt, a stone displaced by a footstep. Elias was amazed by how naturally she understood the land. After some time, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. The view was open and clear, showing long stretches of sand, a few distant bushes, and winding paths created by animals or wind. Elias felt a mixture of hope and uncertainty. There were so many directions a person could have gone. Nalan studied the valley quietly. Then she said, if she came through this ridge, she would look for shade or water next. That means she might have walked toward the dark rocks there. She pointed to a cluster of black-colored stones far in the distance. Elias nodded. "That looks like a place someone would try to reach." "Yes," Nalan said. "But it is far, and we do not know how long she could walk. We will need to rest before we go that way." Elias agreed. They found a shaded area near the ridge and sat down. The breeze was gentle, and for the first time since morning, the air felt comfortable. Nalan closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quietness wash over her. Elias looked at her with admiration. She had walked through a flood, searched the desert, pushed herself beyond exhaustion, and still found the strength to keep going. He respected her courage more than he could express. After a peaceful silence, Nalan opened her eyes and said softly, "You ask nothing about my people, but you do not judge. Many do not do that." Elias shifted slightly. "My father taught me that respect works both ways," he replied. "If you meet someone different from you, you listen first." Nalan smiled. "Your father taught you well. Listening saves more lives than speaking." They shared a quiet moment, understanding each other more clearly now. Even though they came from different worlds, the desert had placed them on the same path. After resting, they prepared to move again. Elias stood and stretched his back. He checked his canteen, saddle, and gear to make sure everything was secure. Nalan adjusted her sitting position and took a deep breath. Before they started, Elias asked, "Are you ready?" Nalan nodded slowly. "Yes. We must keep going. She may still be waiting, somewhere ahead." Her words carried hope, and that hope fueled Elias too. He walked beside the horse as they descended from the ridge toward the valley below. The land was quiet but inviting, as if it carried secrets waiting to be discovered. As they moved, Elias felt a stronger bond forming between them. Not friendship in the usual sense, but a kind of understanding that comes only from facing the land together. Trust built, not through words, but through shared effort. They walked until the sun began to lower, softening the light. They still had far to go, but the journey no longer felt impossible. They had clues, direction, and determination, and for the first time, Elias felt confident that they were getting closer not just to finding someone, but to learning the full story hidden within the desert's silent paths. Their steps were steady, their resolve was clear, they would keep going. The sun slowly moved toward the western horizon as Elias and Nalan continued walking through the wide, open valley. The land before them glowed with shades of warm gold and deep orange, and each shadow stretched longer than before. Though the air was still dry, the heat was no longer sharp. Instead, it wrapped around them softly, like a quiet reminder of the long day that was coming to an end. Elias kept glancing toward the cluster of dark rocks far ahead. That was their goal now, the place where Nalan believed the missing woman might have gone. The rocks looked closer than they really were, and Elias knew it would take several more hours to reach them. But he didn't mind the slow progress. He had learned that searching the desert required patience and clear thinking. Nalan sat quietly on the saddle, watching the ground with sharp eyes. Her strength had returned enough for her to sit without leaning too heavily, and she looked more alert than she had since Elias first found her. Every now and then, she would raise her hand slightly, pointing to something only she could understand. A faint track, a shift in the sand, a sign left by someone who had passed before them. At one point, she asked Elias to stop. She slid carefully off the horse, landed on her feet, and walked a few steps forward. She crouched near a patch of soft dirt and touched the ground with her fingertips. Elias approached slowly. "What did you find?" he asked. Nalan brushed away a thin layer of sand, revealing a shallow print. "A footprint," she said quietly. "Not yours, not mine." She traced the outline gently, small steps, lightweight, someone tired, but still moving forward. Elias felt a small spark of hope. "It could be her," he said. "It could," Nalan agreed, though her voice carried a thoughtful tone. "The print is not very fresh. Maybe made before sunrise." She stood up slowly. "We must hurry, but we must not rush. If we move too fast, we will miss more signs." Elias respected her judgment. "We'll go at your pace," he said. Nalan smiled slightly. "Our pace," she corrected. They continued forward, following the gentle direction of the tracks. The land shifted again as they walked. What had been soft sand slowly turned into firmer ground with scattered stones. The desert plants grew fewer, but the air became cooler as a soft wind drifted through the valley. For a while, neither of them spoke. Elias liked the silence. It wasn't an empty silence, it was the kind that made him feel connected to the land and to the moment. He enjoyed walking beside someone who understood the desert so deeply. There was something calming about the way Nalin observed the world. She didn't rush her thoughts or interrupt the quiet. She listened to the land, and the land seemed to respond. Eventually, Nalin turned to Elias and asked, "What brought you on this path? You were alone when you found me." Elias shrugged lightly. "I was moving cattle," he said, "trying to reach a trading post before the week ends." "Are you always alone on your journeys?" she asked. "Most of the time," he replied. "My work keeps me on the trail. Sometimes it's peaceful. Sometimes it's tiring. But the land teaches me new things every trip." Nalin nodded slowly. "The desert is like a teacher," she agreed. "It gives lessons through wind, sun, and silence." She paused thoughtfully. "But it is rare to walk it with someone who listens." Elias wasn't sure what to say at first. He wasn't used to hearing compliments spoken so softly and sincerely. He smiled and answered, "Maybe we were meant to cross paths today." Nalin looked at him with gentle eyes. "Maybe," she said. "The desert brings people together when it chooses." They walked for another hour, moving closer to the dark rocks ahead. As they approached, Elias noticed that the ground changed once more. The sand became darker, and the rocks around them showed signs of recent moisture. The floodwaters must have passed through here not long ago. Nalin asked him to stop again. She bent near a cluster of stones and picked up a small, rounded object. "Look," she said, handing it to Elias. He examined it carefully. It was a small bead, light brown in color, with a carved pattern running through its center. "Is this from your people?" he asked. "Yes," Nalin replied softly. "It is a bead worn by the younger woman we are searching for. She made it herself. She liked making small things with her hands." Elias felt a stronger wave of hope rise within him. "Then she came this way. She can't be too far." Nalin closed her fingers gently around the bead for a moment, as if holding it gave her strength. "She was strong," she said. "She kept moving, even after everything that happened. She is not someone who gives up easily." Elias admired the pride and affection in her voice. "We'll find her," he said with confidence. "I know we will." Nalin nodded and handed the bead back to him. Elias tucked the bead safely into his pocket. As they moved closer to the dark stones, the breeze grew stronger, whistling softly between the rock formations. The sound echoed like a quiet song. Elias had never seen rocks like these before. They were tall, smooth in some places, and sharp in others. The shapes looked almost like sculptures, formed by time and the weather. When they reached the base of the rocks, Nalin asked Elias to help her dismount. She wanted to search on foot. Together, they walked around the large stones, scanning for signs, footprints, pieces of cloth, anything that might show where the missing woman had gone. Suddenly, Nalin stopped. She knelt beside a narrow crack between two boulders and touched the ground. "Someone rested here," she said quietly. "Look at how the sand is pressed. Someone sat here, leaning against the rock." Elias examined the area. "How long ago?" "Maybe yesterday," Nalin replied. "Maybe early this morning. The wind has not erased it fully." Nalin raced it fully. Nalin raced it fully this. Nalin replies. Nalin replies. Nalin replies. Elias felt excitement grow inside him. They were close. Very close. Nalin pointed toward a narrow passage between two tall rocks. "She might have gone inside," she said. "There is shade. Maybe she waited there, hoping someone would find her." Elias held the horse's reins and followed beside Nalin as they stepped into the passage. The temperature dropped as soon as they walked inside. The rocks blocked out the sun completely, creating a cool, quiet shelter. The passage opened into a small, hidden hollow, like a natural room formed by stone walls. Elias looked around carefully. The air felt still. He could hear the soft sound of wind outside the rocks. But here, inside, everything was quiet. Nalin moved slowly, examining the ground with careful eyes. Then she stopped suddenly, her expression changing. She picked up something from the ground, a strip of cloth tied neatly around a small branch. She was here, Nalin whispered. She left this as a sign. She wanted someone to find it. Elias stepped closer. Does it mean she's close? Nalin looked around, unsure for the first time. I do not know, she admitted quietly. She might have rested here and then moved on. Or she might be nearby. The desert is wide, but she is smart enough to leave signs. Elias looked at the narrow entrance. If she left the cloth here, maybe she went deeper into the valley behind these rocks. Maybe, Nalin said softly. She looked both hopeful and worried, as if battling two feelings at once. She survived the flood. She walked far. But she cannot walk forever without help. A long silence settled over the hollow. Elias could feel Nalin's emotions, even though she didn't speak them out loud. Her worry, her hope, her fear for someone she cared about. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We're close. We'll find her. Nalin looked at him slowly, her eyes softening. Thank you, Elias Carter, she said. You did not know me, but you walked beside me as if you did. Elias smiled kindly. We're in this together now. Nalin nodded, her determination returning. Then we must keep moving, she said. She is somewhere ahead, and we cannot stop now. With renewed strength, they stepped out of the hollow and faced the land stretching beyond the rocks. They were ready for whatever came next. The first light of morning touched the rocky cliffs with a soft orange glow. Elias woke up slowly, feeling the weight of the long journey they had taken together. The sandstorm had finally ended during the night, leaving the desert surprisingly quiet. For a moment, he sat there in the small shelter they had found, listening to the calm wind brushing over the rocks. It almost felt peaceful, but he knew their journey was not finished. Nalin was still weak, and they still had to find help. He turned toward her. Nalin was awake, though her breathing was slow and heavy. She looked tired, but her eyes held that same determined light he had seen in her from the very beginning. She had survived things he could hardly imagine, and even now, she was thinking ahead. We should move soon, she whispered. Her voice was soft, but steady. Elias nodded. Even after everything she had been through, she was still the one reminding him to stay strong. He stood and stepped outside for a moment to check the surroundings. The sun was rising quickly, and he knew the heat would grow stronger with every hour. They had a short window before the desert became difficult again. He helped Nalin stand. She leaned on him, but she was trying hard not to put too much weight on his arm. That was something he had noticed about her from the beginning. She never wanted to be a burden, even when she clearly needed help. Elias didn't mind supporting her. He simply wanted her to reach safety. As they walked out of the rocky passage, the desert looked different. The sandstorm had shifted the landscape, smoothing some dunes and piling others high. But the air felt fresher, as if the land itself had taken a deep breath after the storm. Elias felt a bit of hope awaken in him, something he had not allowed himself to feel the previous day. They continued forward, moving slowly but steadily. Then, as they climbed a small ridge, Elias heard something faint. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the sound came again soft, distant, and rhythmic. It almost sounded like voices carried by the breeze. Nalin reacted before Elias said a word. She looked up sharply, her eyes scanning the open land. Listen, she said quietly. He listened again. This time, he heard it more clearly. Echoes of calls. Voices calling out in a pattern. Like people searching for someone. Is it your people? Elias asked, though he tried not to raise her expectations too fast. Nalin didn't answer right away. She listened again, focusing hard. Then, with a small, relieved breath, she nodded. Yes, my people, they are looking for us. Hearing the hope in her voice made Elias's heart feel lighter. They were close, closer than he expected. He adjusted his grip on her arm and guided her down the ridge. but the desert still made everything difficult. Even though they knew help was near, the land stretched wide and endless between them and the sound of the voices. Every step felt important. Elias kept glancing around, making sure nothing in the environment caused trouble for them again. After what they had been through, he wasn't taking any chances. As they walked, the voices grew louder. Then, on the horizon, Elias saw movement figures on horseback riding across the open desert. They were spread out in a wide search pattern, checking the land carefully. Elias watched them for a moment as they came closer. He felt a nervous weight in his chest. He didn't know how they would react to him, a cowboy from outside their tribe, traveling alone with an injured Apache woman. But Nalin noticed his hesitation and gently tightened her grip on his arm. "They will understand," she said softly. Elias nodded, trying to trust her words more than his own fear. He stood a little straighter and continued walking with her toward the approaching riders. Within minutes, the riders saw them. One rider shouted something loudly to the others, and soon the whole group turned toward Elias and Nalin. Their horses kicked up sand as they rushed forward in a fast but controlled gallop. The riders reached them quickly. The first man to dismount was older, with sharp eyes and long tied-back hair. His expression changed the moment he saw Nalin. He rushed forward, speaking quickly in Apache, his voice filled with worry and relief. Nalin answered him in the same language, her tone calm but emotional. Elias stood quietly, unsure what they were saying but understanding the emotion just by looking at them. The man gently held Nalin's shoulders, checking her condition. Then, after a moment, he turned to Elias. There was no anger in his eyes, only gratitude. The man placed one hand on his chest, then made a respectful gesture toward Elias. Elias didn't understand it fully, but he could feel its meaning. It was thanks. The riders helped Nalin onto a horse with great care. They wrapped her in a blanket and spoke to her softly, relieved she was alive. One of the riders returned to Elias and offered him water. Elias took it with a grateful nod. Nalin looked at Elias from the horse. Even though she was surrounded by her people now, she didn't let the moment pass without speaking to him. "You did not give up," she said. Her voice carried a warmth he had not heard before. "Even when things were hard, you kept going. That is why I am alive." Elias felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to being praised like that. He had simply done what felt right, but hearing her say it made something inside him change. Another rider rode forward and offered Elias a horse so he could travel with them. Elias climbed onto it, and the group headed back toward their camp. The journey was easier now. With the riders leading and the wind at their backs, they moved quickly across the land. Along the way, several riders asked Elias questions in broken English. They wanted to know how he found Nalin, how he helped her through the storm, and how long they had been struggling in the desert. Elias answered honestly, keeping his words simple. He didn't try to make himself look like a hero. He just told the truth. When they reached the Apache camp, the air filled with sounds of relief. Families rushed to greet the returning riders. Some looked tearful when they saw Nalin alive. Elders came forward to speak with her, to hear her story, and to make sure she received proper care. Elias watched from a respectful distance. He didn't want to disrupt their reunion, but he also felt a deep sense of peace. He had brought her home. After some time, an elder approached him, a calm woman with gentle eyes. She spoke carefully in English. "Nalin told us what you did," she said. "You protected her when she could not protect herself. You followed her words when she asked you to keep moving. You helped her survive the desert." Elias lowered his eyes. "I just did my best." The elder smiled warmly. "Sometimes doing your best is a gift to others." She handed him a small object wrapped in soft cloth. Elias unwrapped it slowly. It was a handmade token, a small carving made from smooth desert wood. The design was simple but beautiful. It showed a strong, rising shape, like a person pushing forward against the wind. It symbolized courage. "This is from Nalin," the elder said. "She wants you to remember that strength can come even in the hardest moments." When Nalin was strong enough to speak again, she motioned for Elias to come closer. He approached her quietly. "You have your road," she said gently, and I have mine. But our paths crossed for a reason. You helped me, and I will always remember that. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. He didn't want to say goodbye, but he knew it was the right thing. She needed her people, and he needed to return to his own journey. Take care of yourself, he said softly. Nolan nodded. You too. And when things feel difficult, remember what you did out there. Do not stop. Keep going. Her words echoed the first words she had spoken to him in the desert. But now, they carried new meaning. They were no longer a warning, they were guidance. A message he would take with him for the rest of his life. Elias mounted his horse and began riding away from the camp. He looked back once and saw Nalin watching him with calm, grateful eyes. He raised a hand in a small wave, and she returned the gesture. As he rode into the open desert again, the land felt different. Wider, maybe. Brighter. He carried the token in his pocket, feeling its shape warm against his hand. It reminded him that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about moving forward, even when you weren't sure what the next step would bring. And so he rode on, carrying with him the memories of an unlikely friendship, a storm they survived together, and the words that had guided him through the hardest moments. Don't stop, keep going,